Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about you made a video that was excellent that covered a topic that I've been wanting to talk about it for a long time and make a video about it, and that is nationalism. Primarily, we're talking about nationalism, but also like Swedish identity, national identity.
Yeah.
And I think you made an excellent video about it. That was actually why I wanted to talk to you, because you nailed it in a way. I've been sort of writing down like a script that I was gonna, to make the video, but it just seemed stupid. It just in a way it just felt like I was being, I was just being irritated when I was writing down this. It turned more into a rant than anything interesting. So, I think you really nailed that with your video. Well, I wanted to start off here with just your views on where do you think Swedish nationalism is today?
How should I put this? About where identity politics, or rather nationalism, is in Sweden right now. The way I see it, I actually watched a video today from Identitarian Ideas. That was some sort of conference. I think it was in Stockholm this year. And one of the speakers there said something that was really profound, I think. And he referenced Sun Tzu, that ancient Chinese general.
Oh yeah, wasn't the Art of War?
Yes, exactly. And he said that if you surround your enemy, you must give him a way to flee. You must give him a way out, or he will fight to death. And I think that is where white people are finding themselves more and more today, especially white men. So I think that is the reason why we even see nationalistic movements outside of the fringe skinhead movements of the 1990s.
That's I completely agree with that, because I think it's interesting, because when we talk about nationalism and people, primarily white men, because white men get the shit for everything, but who defend the idea of having a type of national pride, then it immediately goes to skinheads. Everybody starts talking about skinheads, and the thing is, we have a massive demand for skinheads in Sweden, but we don't really have it. We don't really have a serious problem with skinheads. Like if you have the far right in Sweden, they primarily hang out on it, on internet. They're excellent at propaganda. They're excellent at sort of pitching their bullshit ideas, but you're most likely not going to get the shit beat out of you by a skinhead. And people are probably going to protest wildly here, but if you compare to other countries, if you compare to Eastern Europe, for instance, we don't have a problem with like ultra-nationalists in Sweden.
Yeah,
but
no.
as you mentioned, as soon as like a young white man talks about, you should be able to, dare be proud of your country in Sweden without being called a Nazi.
Yeah, yes, of course. The thing is, though, when these men start to realize that whatever they do, they are gonna get shit thrown at them because of their identity, they're gonna start pulling together around their identity and form groups around that to defend themselves. So I think, so to answer the question, if nationalism is on the rise in Sweden, I would say yes. And it's the left that is building it.
Yeah, I think it was an excellent example with the art of war, because that's really what they're doing. It's like we have people who have nothing in common at all with like white nationalists, but they're being dragged kicking and screaming over to the far right by the left. And like you people are Nazis. You hate immigrants, and I've talked to people who are, in my view, full-blown socialists, communists, but they don't like the idea with completely free immigration. and these guys get called Nazis.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I remember, what can it be, 15 years ago now? You know, early 2000s, when immigrants started to pour in from Poland, you know, workers,
Yeah.
like carpenters and lorry drivers and so on, and the left was they were up in arms about that, and then a couple of years later it all sort of shifted to everyone is welcome and everyone is a refugee. But I want also to talk a bit about the difference between nationalism in itself and National Socialism. National Socialism that's actually a left-wing ideology, because it is a socialist ideology, and for some reason the socialists have gotten it into our heads that if you're a National Socialist, you're actually on the right, but no, you're not. You're still on the left. You still have the same ideas as the communists on all things, except the communists are internationalists, while the National Socialists are nationalists. So that's a big difference. So you can be a nationalist on the left, and you can be a nationalist on the right.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to, for instance, in China, I mean, still in China today, they have this type of idea, which it basically is nationalism. It's a type of they try to make people swear loyalty to. It's like a political loyalty to the party, but it's they do it in the way that people, like the textbook nationalist, would be doing to his nation. That I want to defend my nation. I swear loyalty to my nation. I want my nation to be able to keep its own power and be able to make its own future. But they have the same idea in several different communist countries, where they try to make people to swear a loyalty that is very similar to the type of stuff you get from nationalists. But then it's about the party. I haven't heard if it's about the great leader, but it's definitely about the party, like your comrades. You're supposed to swear loyalty to it's kind of weird in a way. And I've actually heard communists that have said, like, straight out that nationalism is something that is used by the bourgeois in order. It's like the evil offspring of capitalism in some fucking weird way. I don't have any idea how they come to that conclusion, but it's all of it is okay apparently if it's this type of political loyalty that you're swearing to the one reigning party of your communist nation. Well, then it's okay all of a sudden.
Well, a socialist believes in Marxist theory, right, about the struggle of the classes, and everyone who doesn't is by necessity an opponent to it, at least from their perspective. So a nationalist wants to build a country around his people. He wants his people to have their own land where they have sovereignty, to build a country that they see fit, while a socialist and a communist, they want a specific political outcome. They want to build this state around their ideology rather than around their people. So of course they would see that as a bourgeoisie thing with nationalism, because it is contrary to their own political agenda.
Yeah, that's I agree with that. And the thing that also is to go back, like, more concrete examples here when it comes to Sweden. I would like to know what you think about this, like when it comes to Ulf Palmer.
Oh, I don't really know a lot about him, to be honest. It was shot the same year I was born, so.
Okay. Basically, for people who are not Swedes and don't really know a lot about Swedish politicians. He basically was a typical example of a champagne socialist. He was born into a very wealthy family. He had the privilege and the money to travel around, to see the world, be groomed in the ideas of communism and socialism. And in a typical Swedish manner, this guy is, or was, he's dead now, completely glorified as a saint. Like everything is perfect with this man, apparently, because he had these socialist ideas. He basically, in a lot of people's eyes, he never really died, because a lot of his behavior still shows through the politicians we have today. And I mean, this politician, we see this still in Sweden, like Ulf Palmer. When Khomeini came to power in Iran, he said Khomeini is using, he's by pedantic measures making sure that his nation has the ability to use every part of its democratic process or some shit. And he said this with a straight face. And he also protested against people in Swedish parliament being critical of the Soviet Union. He traveled to Cuba and seemed to get along very well with Castro. And I mean, the list goes on with this guy, and it's never mentioned. And we still have this in Sweden today. Like we have this. I think actually we inherited that a lot from Ulf Palme. We have. People have protested against me when I say this, but I think you're probably going to agree with me here that Sweden has an anti-American streak.
Yeah, the Swedish people don't really like American politics. We like American culture, at least the popular culture coming from Hollywood, and the music and such. But American Mid-Eastern culture. Oh no, gun culture, oh no, and the politics, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of where I wanted to go with this a bit, because in my view, like one of the reasons I think we're having the problems that we're having today in this country is because these ideas, they never died. I mean, the anti-Americanism, people might say, well, like, yeah, I don't like America. It's not about that. It's about a type of attitude that originates from the 1960s. That comes from America is the root of all evil. Everybody else, like, I mean, this is basically where the sort of self-contempt started. I mean, Sweden got so fucking involved in the Vietnam War, you could almost think that we had soldiers fighting in the war.
Yeah, you could almost think that we were the only ones sending soldiers there. Yeah, exactly. It was a big deal over here. And I think, this is my own conjectures, but I think that the hippies and during the 1960s and 70s, they grew up and they went to universities and got their sociology degrees, and they are now the ones working in the Swedish government. So,
oh yeah,
and in our universities, in the departments of sociology and now gender studies and whatnot, they are the ones producing all the quote-unquote scientific foundation for our politics. They are the ones who write in the newspapers, who had control of the newspapers on an editorial level. They are the ones who are in public service. They are the ones who are in our branches of government. They are our deep state.
Yeah. I love you use that term, because it pisses off liberals so bad. I've been reading Twitter all day where they're describing it as being a conspiracy theory. But I mean, pretty much everybody in the world has noticed the fact that we have a list of politically undesirable people in Sweden, apparently.
The Sweden account.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, isn't that like evidence of something being wrong with our different? I have a hard time translating this word, but different branches of government. because I mean, if you those of you who haven't heard about this, there was this we have an official account for Sweden on Twitter, where it's different users in Sweden that get to be the admins or get to run the account for I think it's a week. And they invited this woman who describes herself as being an internet safety expert. And it's not like safety like she knows something about computers or has any form of skill.
She's an expert in online, safe spaces.
Yeah, exactly. The definition of a safe space. She has these workshops where she teaches business owners how to establish safe spaces in their offices. Like, so their employees don't, some other employees don't write mean things to each other in emails or something. But I mean, she has a complete bullshit education and all of that. But she got the account for an entire week. And I mean, who was surprised? She blocked 14,000 people. And who was surprised? You invite a woman who makes a living out of victimizing people. And then she obviously sees herself as a victim, so she just starts mass blocking people. And here's the interesting part, that she actually sent the list to a state-run institution that we have in this country, and she showed them the list and said, is it okay if I use this block list on your account? And they said yes.
Yeah, the account belongs to the Swedish institution, it's called. It's a branch of government. So it's under the same laws as any branch of government, and registering people's political opinions is an offense over here. So keeping lists of people's political affiliations is definitely not acceptable, and it's even worse when the government does it. And in this instance, the government did it. They established this list of undesirables based on their political affiliations and blocked them.
Yeah, and it's I mean, exactly, and it's also a lot of people. First, I saw people writing this on Twitter, but they were at first they were like, yeah, well, who gives a shit about that account? Well, as you mentioned before, it's a government institution. Or a government institute, or it's a branch of government. They're responsible for trying to portray a positive image of Sweden abroad. So how the fuck are you gonna show a positive image of Sweden when you block 14,000 people? I mean, they blocked Dave Rubin.
I think they blocked like some Israeli. Some Israeli official. Somehow.
Yeah, the Israeli ambassador of Sweden. I mean, what the hell is that? It's like, I mean, I know our government has just burning contempt for Israel, which is mind-blowing to me, like the only democracy in that shithole area of the world, and obviously Sweden is gonna, have some hissy fit and start despising them. But I mean, Bill Gates was on the block list. Yeah. So it's like they took people who had done nothing wrong whatsoever. I mean, I was blocked, and I hadn't even made fun of her yet.
I wasn't, and I was really offended. Yeah.
You did. Oh man, you should have.
I don't have enough followers on Twitter.
It's I actually don't think it's about followers. I think it's even more banal. It's probably someone. It's probably you're not following someone on Twitter that I'm following.
Yeah, it might be.
I don't know how this shit works, because she hasn't been like browsing around and just clicking the block button on 14,000 users. She clearly has some type of lot more effective way to do this. But the whole thing, like why we're going on about this Twitter account, or I think it's important to talk about it, is how unsurprised I got about the fact that a branch of government would be pretty okay with the idea of breaking against our country's constitution, just because people are writing mean things. People seem pretty okay with it. Like, yeah, okay, it was a bad move, but we've unblocked everybody now. well, you broke against our country's constitution.
Yeah, and then they broke
criminal.
it again by when they unblocked people. They also erased that list, so
Yeah.
you can no longer go to them and demand it, which is something that is also part of our constitution. We don't have an actual constitution, but our equivalent of a constitution. It's like a very foundational law that governs how the government works.
Yeah.
Everything that is not secret, state secret somehow, you can, as a citizen, demand to have a copy of, like anything.
We're actually, this is something for the self-hating Swedes out there who say that we don't have anything unique or special about this nation. We're actually the first country in the world to do this.
Yeah.
We're the first nation to exist on this planet who had that you could just go into any state department and just say, you know, I want these official documents, and you have to give them to me.
Yeah, and you don't have to explain why. I don't even think you have to ID yourself.
No. So I mean, there you go. That's something. Like I love this shit. That's one of my pastime hobbies. That's just disproving this whole narrative you constantly hear about Sweden being like we don't have our own culture. We don't have our own national identity. I just love that shit because it's so entertaining to find these typical. I mean, just the fact that we're doing this, that you have to try to debunk such a stupid claim, really says a lot about I think where we are today in Sweden when it comes to nationalism. I mean, I think you zeroed in on it perfectly when you said that it's we're most likely going to see an uprising in nationalism in Sweden, and it's going to be an act of self-defense.
Yeah. I got nothing more to add to it, really.
Yeah. I mean, it's not going to be any type of romantic, like, damn, do you remember the good old glory days of, I don't know, Karolinerna? I mean, it's not going to be anything like that. It's just going to be, we're a nation. We have a right to exist. This is our fucking country.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be that chauvinistic romanticizing about the nation or its history. No. It's going to be a re-establishment of the in-group, basically.
Yeah. And you also talked about that in your video. I think we should. I'd like to hear your thoughts about this because you described nationalism. I think you did it correctly by saying that it's the. See if I want to quote you correctly here, but basically it's wanting to be a part and actively making an effort to be part of an in-group.
Yes.
And that it is social, but it is also very real. I think that because of feminists who go on about sort of gender is a social construct and I think they've kind of ruined the concept a little bit. The whole
the whole concept of socially constructed things.
Yeah, I mean they are very real and they matter, you know. But yeah, I think that was a good observation because. Do you know who Roger Scruton is?
No.
Yeah, he's I think he's great. He's a conservative philosopher from England, and he wrote this brilliant description of when it comes to like what constitutes culture and tradition, or how it functions. And he said that culture and tradition is basically the successful display of dialogue between people throughout history in a country. So the reason we have traditions and the reasons our culture is the way it is because people have been solving problems between each other, and the victors, because they had the best ideas or what have you, they have defined our culture and our traditions. And that's where we have the problem when it comes to like mass immigration. Because that sort of it goes over this very natural process of shooting ideas back and forth at each other, and the best ideas win. Because mass immigration isn't, I mean, it isn't helpful in this, in having that type of dialogue, because there is no dialogue, because you're not allowed to question the ideas that these people bring with them.
Well, it's not just that. The problem is that you're importing another in-group, or rather you're importing a diverse group of people that is not part of the in-group that already lives here. And trying to assimilate them is difficult. It takes a lot of time. And when you get too large of an out-group, not only does that group start to form its own in-group around not belonging to the bigger in-group, and creating these diasporas all around the greatest cities. Well, you're simply going to have a big problem with trying to assimilate these groups. And even if you would succeed, if you have a very big new group of people coming in, that group is so big that it will forever change the indigenous population, the indigenous culture. And if that sort of thing is important to you, then mass immigration is not your cup of tea.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, what Sweden is doing has never, we don't have an example throughout history that proves that what we're currently doing in this country has any positive effect. There is, you constantly hear these, everything that is positive about multiculturalism and what have you, but there is no success story.
There's never been, and the only success stories they bring up is stories about, well, not about multiculturalism. They're talking about the Wallonians that came here in the 19th century. You know, the Dutch engineers that helped us build up our industry. Yeah, okay, so that was a big group of people that came in. They were like 500. Yeah. I don't know, maybe they were 5,000. Doesn't matter. They were minuscule in numbers.
And I mean, I think it was like 90% of them, they moved back.
Yeah.
They moved back home again. I mean, we have the complete opposite. We have unskilled workers, or I mean, let's be
they're
honest.
Not even workers.
No, exactly. They don't. And I mean, the thing is that this is why I think that we're going to have 2018. I think we're either going to have a landslide victory for the Sweden Democrats, or we're probably going to have some form of acts of vigilantism in the streets, because people are like, I mean, the thing you were talking about before when you say there's going to be like an out group within the nation that almost takes pride in being an out group. I mean, that is basically starting to become the Sweden Democratic voter. They're becoming the out group that is proud to be an out group.
Yeah, that's true also.
And I mean, that's the type of shit, and that's the thing that really annoys me with it, because the people who love mass immigration and who are in practice ruining Sweden, they don't listen to reason. We know that since way back. But also, a lot of them are extremely poorly educated on what country they actually live in. It's funny, you know, to be lectured by people who don't know anything about Swedish history. I mean, if you say that like Sweden doesn't have its own culture, then you shouldn't be in office. You shouldn't be in a position of power in the Swedish government.
Yeah, no, I agree on that, but it's not my decision alone. So.
Yeah, but it is a like really serious problem that they're predicting now. For instance, like in 2015, I think we had 163,000 in practice unemployable people who mass immigrated to Sweden. I think like out of 122, one of, like, if you have 122 people, one of them would be a refugee.
Yeah,
the rest of them were economic migrants.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and we had that in 2015, and the prediction now is that we're going to have about 300,000 close family to these people who manage to get asylum here. They have about 300,000 people that are clawing on the doors and they want to come in. And we need to have a landslide victory for the Sweden Democrats where they pretty much promise to, lock the gate and throw away the key. Otherwise, as you said, we're going to have a situation where you have a lot of people that are going to feel surrounded.
I'll say that we'll already have, to harken back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, about vigilantes and such. I think we already have critical mass of an outgroup already to start some serious, if not a civil war, then at least serious tensions between ethnic groups in this country. It works for now only because our government is still rather strong. We have a police force that is semi-functional and so on. The government hasn't collapsed yet.
No, exactly. Norway's waiting for it, though.
Yeah. I think they should build a wall. They got the money for it.
Yeah.
But if this immigration of people brings down the government, if the government collapses, the government doesn't have money to keep its monopoly on force in the bigger cities, then we're going to see basically secessions in the suburbs. People saying, no, this is now Islam territory and we will be using our laws here and we got the militia to back it up.
Yeah, they probably do. I mean, illegal gun ownership has never been as high as it is in Sweden currently. So
yeah, and jihadis has a record of being criminals,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's their basis for recruitment, at least around here, as far as I've heard. It's the criminal gangs. They are the ones who send people to IS, to Daesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's it's a national embarrassment. I'm actually surprised. I've said this earlier. I'm surprised there's not currently countries that have sanctions in place against us because they don't want to finance terrorism.
Oh, it's weird.
Seriously, if you invest in if you buy goods from Sweden, the profit is going to go into the Swedish tax pot, and we know that jihadists on Swedish welfare have gone down and butchered women and children. So
yeah, and then they get even honestly, more when they get back.
Yeah. Exactly. I heard this one case was a guy he went down there and he got shot in the head, and unfortunately he didn't die. So he came back to Sweden and he got Swedish healthcare.
As you do.
Yeah, but that's the type of shit that I agree with you. Like, if we don't seriously start try to defend the monopoly for using force in this country, we're gonna have a really big problem with that because. I mean, currently, it's. I mean, look at our cops. Did you see this video? It's like 4 police officers trying to reel in one guy in one of our suburbs. I mean, it's pathetic.
Yeah, that's just pathetic.
That's just crazy. I mean, what the hell?
They were like 4 cops on one person, and they just couldn't get him. It wasn't a big guy either.
No, and I love the fact that it comes another migrant or another foreigner, and he grabs the guy around the waist and just body slams him in the ground. And even though he does this to help out the cops sort of like push him away, and then they try to take the convict, like bring him into custody, and then they fuck it up again, even though they got help.
Yeah.
But I mean, wouldn't the correct response to that shit be getting pepper spray in your face? And I don't understand why this whole thing, like trying to take someone's the arm of their jacket and like, please come into the car.
Well, that kind of stuff works with Swedes. You can do that with the Swedish guy unless he's high on something, like most of the time anyway.
Yeah, no, that's true.
He's going to accept it. He's going to accept the authority of the police. But as soon as you meet someone who doesn't, well, you're going to have to use force. And we just don't want to do that. Especially especially nowadays, this whole squishy lefty ideology. As I said, it's permeate. What's the word? It's everywhere in government, and of course, it's also part of the police courses. At least that is what I think is the problem. They don't get taught to use force. They're not taught to use force as a tool to get respect from people who doesn't respect anything but force.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a key point. And I mean, what you just said, that's probably complete blasphemy when it comes to, social workers and people who are, as you said, probably training police officers. Like the idea that some people, they don't understand anything except violence. And I mean, in order to help a person who is extremely violent, you probably need to beat the shit out of them and drag them into a car, and then after that you can start to work to try to sort them out. But you can't this, like these cops were doing, just standing there and sort of yelling at him in hopes that he's going to start crying and just walk into the car by himself. We're talking about Swedish culture and traditions. You had an excellent example there. That's very Swedish. That's very Swedish behavior. The fact that we respect and follow the law, like to the letter. Sweden, when it comes to statistics, Sweden is one of the countries in the world that has the highest level of trust in their fellow man.
And in our government.
Yeah, which I personally think is one of our most crappiest traits as a nation. I think we have a bloated trust in government.
Yeah, it's our Achilles heel.
Yeah, because we have these fantastically unfitting people who have way too much money. I mean, the economist Milton Friedman, he talked about this. Like as soon as you have really big government, they start doing really stupid shit, and they do this because they think that they have bottomless pockets, which they in practice have. I mean, if you rake in as much taxes as we do in Sweden, you can pretty much, like, if you have a shitty idea, for instance, what should we say, painting classes in order to cure returned jihadists. The state put up painting classes, so they have a way to sort of ventilate the violence from themselves, and they're going to stop being terrorists that way, some shit idea like that. That would never happen if you had a small government, because they would be held immediately responsible. The citizen would laugh their asses off, and they would have blown their money. They wouldn't have any more money for their shitty ideas, and the citizen would be pissed off, and the government would be in a really bad place. But in Sweden, if you have a terrible idea that obviously doesn't work, like this solution, we're supposed to build more, what's it called, fritidsgårdar.
Youth centers.
Yeah, we're going to cure sort of gang criminality by building youth centers, and then they smack up like I don't know, I've lost count by now. And obviously it doesn't work. I mean, if you're hooked on drugs and you enjoy beating the shit out of people and robbing people, it's not exactly a lack of being able to play table tennis that is the problem in your life. But they keep doing this. They keep building these youth centers.
Well, the problem is, I think that youth centers sort of works for people in the in-group. Because if you have a homogeneous society like we had back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, people get into criminality because of personal flaws that can stem from anything from birth to how they were raised, to catastrophes that happened to them, to perhaps, but I don't think it's socioeconomic stuff, but perhaps. And those things can be mitigated if you get these people into, well, I hate to use the word, but like a safe space. A space where they can meet grown-ups that are not fucked up, where they can talk, where they can get help. Yeah, okay, that might work. You might actually solve those kind of problems there. But I think that the main reason why we have gang criminality now, if you look at who these people are, these people are people from the out group. They are in gangs as a way to mark that they are in the out group. That's a way for them to distance themselves from society at large, and create their own subculture in the strictest sense. So that cannot be solved with youth centers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a topic that is skillfully avoided by our mainstream media as well as people in our government. That is the fact that there is a very strong case to be made that a lot of immigrants in Sweden hate Swedes. Like, I mean, if you look at criminal gangs, for instance, they've admitted at several times that they deliberately target Swedes because they consider Swedes to be like weak pussies that are easy to rob, and they just think it's good fun. They don't want to rob a person who maybe is as poor as they are, because that person is really going to put up a fight for his cell phone.
The thing is, I think that big reason why is that they are right in that a Swedish person is much easier to rob, because we don't have an honor culture. Getting robbed, it's not okay. It's a traumatic experience, I suppose, depending on how much violence they use. But for us, using violence is a sign that you have lost, basically. But to these guys, not using violence is a sign of cowardice. That's exactly their go-to response in any situation where they find someone who's opposed to them in any way. They at least start to project their own capability of using force, projecting force onto others to get quote-unquote respect. That respect that gangs want. It's not respect in a Swedish sense, but in their world, that is respect. And if you get a person then from such a culture meeting a Swedish person, it's going to be a complete culture clash. They are not going to be able to communicate in a way that makes sense to either one of them, because the Swedish person thinks that this guy is completely nuts. He's using force. He lost already, and the other guy thinks that this guy is a complete pussy. I can do anything. He's not standing up for himself. I won this, he thinks. So they both go from the encounter thinking that they won. And the problem is that the Swedish guy is fooling himself. I mean, in a moral sense, he's right. But in a political sense, or in the long run, he's wrong. He's losing.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I'm not really sure about your position on this, but that's why I do not like pacifists. I know people like in pretty close, like I have people I know very well who describe themselves as being pacifists, but it's I think you constantly just you let other people lose, as you put it, so that you can be a pacifist. It's like, I hate this position where, like, I'm going to take the high road. Well, you're not really taking the high road. You're getting slowly fucked over.
Yeah, and I'm an expert at that.
of being fucked over.
of not getting into fights and letting them sort of walk out of there just thinking they won. Basically, I've never had to fight for anything that is important, so it doesn't really matter. I'd rather give up my place at the bar than actually get into a fight. It's too much of a hassle.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's a very Swedish way of approaching it. I mean, a redneck would never do that. He would just punch someone's teeth in, and he would be ready to get his own teeth punched in to save his honor, because rednecks still got a bit of honor culture in them. We don't. We've had a solid society for too long, and too long, quote unquote. I mean, it's a good thing, but the thing that happens is that then the individuals in society don't need to be able to use force themselves. and that has consequences, especially when you get people into the country en masse that are ready and willing to use violence.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's
And no, not all immigrants, but a much greater proportion of them.
yeah, I mean, compared to the native Swede, I mean, the numbers are fucking staggering.
Yeah.
It's like you always got to make that comparison. I hate that argument where people say like, well, not all immigrants. Well, of course it's not all immigrants. That's a retarded point to make. It's if comparatively speaking, there is a higher tendency for violent immigrant groups than it is in Swedish groups. And I mean, this isn't shocking for anybody. I mean, we had this in Sweden even before we started with this, just importing the entire Middle East. I mean, back before we had like mass immigration, the most violent people we had in our jails, that was Finnish people.
Yep.
That was the most violent group of people we had in this country locked up in Swedish jails. That was the Finns, because I mean they still have a lot more violent crime in Finland because they have laxer alcohol laws.
Not only that, but I suppose that helps.
helps in the yeah, but I mean it's so when we're talking about the Swede and like use of violence, I mean we've been like this for a long time, and the violence usually has come from immigration. I mean, the people in Sweden today who are still violent, that is people who live like in the middle out in the woods somewhere, and they're not violent as in I'm going to fuck you up just because I think it's fun. They're violent in the way that I might actually shoot you if you try to steal my tractor.
Yeah.
Like it's in self-defense, but it is in self-defense, with teeth. In like when it comes to Swedish law, I almost puked a bit there.
That's what Sour Topics does.
Yeah, I just swallowed myself. But when it comes to self-defense in Sweden, it's the same thing. Like Swedish gun laws, they're designed for a group of people that are not used to have to defend themselves.
Yeah.
We don't even have in our minds that we might need to defend ourselves. That's why I fucking love America, because they have the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I agree.
They have the idea in the back of their head that we might get a tyrannical asshole in charge, and then we'll know that he has to pick apart militias that are everywhere throughout the entire country who hates his guts. Some of the militias maybe support him, but then you have all of the other states who hate him. That's what always happens in the case of a tyrannical dictator taking over. He just takes everybody's guns. In Sweden, you don't even have to do it. It's a pain in the ass to get a gun.
Yeah, it's how should I put it? It's a matter of responsibility, of where you as a culture place the responsibility for the safety of the people. Here we place that responsibility on the government, and in America, at least up until recently, that responsibility was placed on the population themselves.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is better in the sense that it creates a better society, a society that is better at taking care of their own shit.
Yeah.
But with the drawback that you will get more gun violence. And I suppose you can think of that as something that makes it still worth it, It's a, how should I put it? It's one of these calculations. What are they called? Cost-benefit calculation.
Yeah.
And a funny thing about Swedish gun laws is that guns, you may buy guns for hunting, and you may buy guns for target practice. And the guns you may buy for target practice they are basically the same guns that you can buy in America. It's semi-automatic rifles and handguns and pistols and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You may buy an R-15, at least theoretically. And some people do have them.
Yeah.
But the movement around this, and the laws are made that you must be part of a gun club, a target practice club, to buy a gun, and these clubs, they were formed in the early 20th century as a precursor to the Home Guard. They were skarpskytterörelsen. They were a group of civilians forming basically militias in order to help the army in defense of the nation. So they were allowed to do this. Basically, back then it was with their hunting rifles, but they formed this union around it, and it got legalized that way. That's how the laws were made around it. But that is completely lost now, though.
Yeah. That's fascinating, though. I didn't know that. I gotta check that out. That has to be translated to like the marksman, marksman union or something. Marksman.
Yeah. And
cool.
that rather quickly got transformed into the Home Guard just a couple of years later. I think this was like in the 30s or something.
Yeah.
And then after the Second World War, you had officers that started pistol clubs, and after that, civilians wanted to join the pistol clubs to shoot pistols, and that's how that got legalized.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating, because it's I mean, personally, when it comes to being a Swede, I'm probably considered to be a gun nut, because I'm extremely pro-gun, like responsible gun ownership. But I think you should be able to go into a store just buy a gun. Just you don't have committed criminal offenses and you're not mentally ill or anything. I think you should just go in and be able to buy a gun. I don't understand why that has to anything to do with anybody else, like between you and the shopkeeper.
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm not sure, but I think I agree. I haven't really pondered it. I haven't made that cost-benefit calculation yet, but I think I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's limits to it. I mean, I don't think you should be able to go in and buy like a rocket launcher, but you should be able to go in and just buy a gun. I mean, in Sweden, for instance, when you think about it, we have an understaffed police force, and criminals know this. They know that the police is understaffed, and so the majority of people in Sweden today who own guns are criminals.
Oh yes.
So if you just think about morally, just from a moral standpoint, do you think it's acceptable then to limit the citizen's ability to own a gun, considering the fact that the thugs have all the guns? So I mean, it's that type of reasoning that has made me like, I think a small little Swedish woman should be able to maybe carry a gun in her bag. I want the would-be rapist to have to think one more time, I wonder if she's going to shoot me if I try something. Because today they know it's not going to happen. She probably doesn't even have pepper spray. It's illegal in Sweden.
Yeah, that is crazy. But
Yeah.
I can sort of understand it. I mean I know where it comes from, why it's not legal, but I don't agree with it. I think it should be.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's happening now is that you call the cops, and then after the criminal is done, killing you and raping your wife, then the cops turn up.
Yeah,
That's when, well, the police is here. We're gonna pick up the pieces of your ruined life. I mean, what the hell?
we're gonna swap some DNA and then just cancel the investigation because we had other stuff to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like we, the 5 police officers in your entire county, had other things to do.
Yeah, I read it just the other day about some county in rural Sweden. I think it was up north somewhere, where they're gonna have to close down, like, I don't know the figures now. I think it was like 12 out of 15 police stations in that county during the summer because they're understaffed.
It's I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't real. You know,
it would be hilarious.
Yeah, in a way, like, yeah, we don't have enough cops, so we're closing down the station. It's like, what? I mean, that's the same thing they're doing with the hospitals. They're like, yeah, we don't have enough personnel here, so we're going to start teaching people how to give birth in their car.
Yeah, that's just insane.
Yeah, and I want to try to.
All the while, the politician says that, well, can you point to anything that's wrong? I mean, nothing is collapsing. The country's not collapsing. Come on, can you point to anything? And then you point to that, and they just go, la 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 la.
We'll accept that. Can you point at something else? That's going down the shitter. But I mean, the thing that people never really talk about, like I've had some pretty severe arguments with people about this, is like you get these comments from your fellow Swedes at times where they say, well, I mean, we're still a great country to live in, da 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 da, not considering the amount of taxes we pay. We're not considering how the enormous amounts of money we pay in taxes in Sweden. It's not good. We don't have good healthcare considering how much we're paying.
Yeah, we're paying like what is it, 50%?
Yeah, I mean you should be able, like, we have 40,000 elderly people in Sweden today who are malnutritioned. How do you say that? Malnourished. Yeah, thanks. I mean, 40,000 people that have been, working their entire lives, and they're fucking starving. How do you defend that if you have as high taxes as we have?
Well, it's just indefensible.
Yeah, and I mean, to go back to what you said, like if we talk about the rise of nationalism, I mean that's a way. People always say, like, where does all the hate come from? Where does all the racist come from? The racist comes from the guy who sees his dad that has been working his entire life rotting away in an old people's home because they don't have enough people working there, like lying in his own shit alone in a bed because nobody comes by and sees how he is, and his son maybe lives in a completely different area of Sweden. That is the guy who's going to become a, I quote, Nazi or racist.
It's infuriating. It's infuriating. It really is. And what we're going to do about it, I don't know.
I mean, the obvious idea would be, or the obvious thing that you could do would to be, start some type of activist movement against it. But when it comes to like hate crime in Sweden, it's like hate crime. When it comes to laws about hate crimes in Sweden, they're fantastic for the person who likes to convict people of hate crimes, but they're terrible for the person who is accused of being having committed a hate crime, because they're so exceptionally vague.
Yeah, nebulous.
Yeah, it's like it's hard to translate it. But if you're insulting or harassing a specific group of people, and they have even inserted faith into the definition. So if you're insulting or slandering someone's faith, then you've committed a hate crime. Well, who defines if I'm slandering their faith? Because I mean, we have several Muslims in Sweden. Rashid Musa is an excellent example of a professional victim, and I mean, he gets a diaper rash over everything. Everything is insulting according to him. So then I've just committed a hate crime.
Yeah, but I think that the real opposition there is not the law. I mean, that is bad. I don't think that speech should be tampered with and criminalized that way. I'm much more for American type of free speech, but I don't think that is what is keeping people back, the fear of the law. I think what people are afraid of is, and so am I must admit, it's the social ostracization. I mean, being shunned for your opinions. It's the social lashback against your speech. That is the problem. I mean, my family is leftist. I was a leftist up until a decade ago.
Yeah.
I don't really want to antagonize them too much. I'm talking about to them about this a bit, but
Yeah.
I don't really want to push it, not too hard, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the
And
same
then we
here.
have the newspapers. I mean, they go after people. They really do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a topic just for an entire video in itself. Our media is, I mean, they're criminals. But I was thinking of what you said in your video when it comes to the whole social being ostracized. You mentioned like being thrown out into the cold.
Yeah.
So it's like we have that in our culture in a way that we put a lot of effort into trying to keep the peace in a way.
You have to get along, even if you disagree. You get along.
Yeah.
And by not sticking your neck out with an unpopular opinion, if that's what you have to do, because, and I think this is rooted in our culture because of where we come from. I mean, this is a cold country, and we're a poor farmer society, Protestants, and you had to stick together. You had to make it work, and you can't have people with, you know, Italian type of attitude around here back then, because that would just not work. You would get shunned.
Yeah.
The people would just simply throw you out, and then you stand there in the middle of the snow in December or January, and you have no longer do you have any access to the food you gathered during the summer, because that's indoors and you're outside.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, it's like if we take because I think it's good you brought that up, because a lot of people don't know that Sweden, like historically, Sweden has been a pretty shitty country to live in up until very recently.
Yes, it was the industrialization that made it possible for us to get out of extreme poverty.
Yeah.
We have always, at least since the Christianing of this nation, we've been a very poor country.
Yeah, I mean, why do you think like millions of Swedes just scrambled to get out of here during the American Homestead Act,
Yeah,
where they said
exactly.
like if you manage to get over here, you can have free land.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we had potatoes and freezing cold and just complete miserable conditions. Like if you had a harvest that sort of went bad and it didn't pay off, your entire family would die. So I mean, there you have an example of this, the importance of being part of this of the group when it comes to Swedish culture and how a lot of Swedes act. That if you play along with all the bullshit that the guy on the farm a little bit away, or the other farm down the road, if you go along with his bullshit, then maybe if something like if a harvest goes bad or something, then maybe he's going to help your family.
Yes,
While
exactly.
if you put a foot down and you know, well, this is what I think, then you know he might not be so willing.
Yes, exactly.
So,
And that has its upsides and its downsides, like everything. And one of the plus sides of it is that we are exceptionally good at cooperating and working together. We are really good at that. So that is also one of the reasons why we got so rich after the industrialization, because we had a culture that really worked well in an industrialized nation. This whole working together, pulling together, and topple that with Protestant work ethics, you know?
yeah, I mean that's also something that's pretty much never mentioned. I felt that our Christian foundation is also very important. That I mean, I give the high taxes in Sweden and big government. I give Sweden, like, or not Sweden. I love my country, but the Swedish sort of political system, I give them a lot of shit because they collect so much taxes, and I personally think they give too little back. But if we look historically, Sweden and people who are been in government have done a really good job with actually caring for the nation. And I think that's where, as you said, with the cooperation part comes in. That we as a people have always had high confidence in people in government, because we as a people are very well at working together towards a common goal. But like in later years, that's not the case anymore. Like the people we have in office now, they're actively indebting the people in Sweden. They're borrowing money to pay for immigration.
Yeah, they do. But
that's complete blasphemy if you compare it to the people who were running the nation in like the 1920s and 1930s.
Yeah, and about that, it's a bit strange actually. You know how they talk about the American debt, and the American state or national debt.
Yeah.
That is high, really high. But our national debt is not that high. It's actually low, quote unquote, if you compare to other nations. I mean, it should be a lot higher. But the reason why it isn't is because we don't protest when they raise taxes. They can just up the taxes instead of borrowing. In America, you can't really just up the taxes. You have to take the money from somewhere else than the population that you have in front of you. You have to take it from the population ahead of you that doesn't have a say in the matter. And that's why we don't have so big of a national debt. On the other hand, we have sky-high personal debt, and that's a different thing. Yeah. Or perhaps it's the same.
Yeah, that's a valid point, and also, I mean, as you said, when it comes to Swedes, the typical Swede has terrible, how should I say, financial mobility. That I think that was a little bit what you were talking about when it comes to personal debt. That like the average Swede usually is pretty like burdened down by different types of debt. And it also is very different, like if we compare, for instance, the US and in Sweden, they have completely different outlooks on acquiring a job. Because in Sweden, due to union demands and all that, it's basically like getting married to get hired. Like if you get hired for a nice job, you get like a shitload of different benefits. While in the US, I know it's still hard to find work in America as well. There's a lot of young unemployed people in the US. I know that, but it's still, the employer has a lot more freedom in what he expects from the employee. In Sweden, the employee has like a shit ton of different benefits that they're entitled to. So that changes sort of the whole outlook on acquiring a job in Sweden. So that also restricts the Swedes' mobility, because the job market is a bit of a pain in the ass. Like in the US, I know people who live there, they actually like it on your resume if it says that you've been switching jobs a lot, because a lot of employers see that as being that you're ambitious, that you don't settle for a crap job. You're constantly trying to move up the ladder. While in Sweden, a lot of employees, they would view that as you being unfaithful.
Yep.
You're not faithful to the company, so that means you're a risk. I might have to pay you a bunch of benefits, and then you're just going to leave me. So, I mean, so that I think that was a good topic to talk about when it comes to trust in Sweden, because that's it's one of our finer traits, but it's also extremely dangerous in combination with people who don't value trust in the same way.
Yeah, it's not a good trait to have when you are surrounding yourself with untrustworthy people.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like we have to be very careful here, because when we're talking about untrustworthy people, I agree with that, because I'm not talking about it like in a racial sense.
Yeah, me neither. I was talking about the politicians.
You were talking about the politicians. I was talking about when it comes to immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that as in not a racial thing, because that's fucking retarded. I'm meaning it as coming from a country where you don't have like the privilege of having trust in your government. You don't have that. You're an idiot if you trust your government in a lot of the countries in Africa, for instance. You maybe have like rivaling warlords I mean, are you going to show any trust for either of those people? Of course not. They want to hack you up with a machete, you know? So you have people who come from countries where naturally they have all the reason in the world to not trust officials, to not trust people, maybe not even trust the person who lives next door to them, because they might, I don't know, steal their shit because they're living in like complete poverty.
Yeah.
So that's the point I'm trying to make, like out of a economic point of view, and also cultural. I mean, it's difficult to have a country that has very high trust in people, and then people coming from a situation where it's just retarded to trust people.
Yeah, it's a culture clash of epic proportions. I mean, Swedish society is it's quite unique. I mean, at least how should I put it? Nordic societies. I mean, the Nordic societies are rather similar. Nordic culture is rather similar, but it's rather different actually from other European cultures and African and Middle Eastern cultures. I mean, that's like I could just as well go to Mars and try to get along with Martians. That would work just as well as me getting down to, I don't know, Saudi Arabia or Syria or something. It's not that these people are bad people. It's just that the culture is so different that I can't interpret them correctly.
That is a problem. That is a massive problem when it comes to integrating different cultures with each other.
Yes, and another problem from an economic standpoint is that the Swedish welfare state is hinged on the population being trusting of the government and basically having a type of Nordic culture, because if you don't have that sort of ethic that we have around not taking stuff that doesn't belong to you, basically. Yeah, I don't know how I should put this in a way that it doesn't offend people in the wrong way, but when we started with these welfare programs in the 1960s, 70s, I mean, people did not abuse those systems because that would be a dishonorable thing to do.
Yeah.
People just didn't. People who had right to get money for stuff, you know, didn't get that money if they thought that they didn't need it. And
exactly.
And with such a culture, a welfare state sort of works. I mean, it's not a catastrophe, but if you erode that culture, then the welfare state starts to disintegrate. Then you get people on a broader scale abusing the systems, trying to get money that they don't have right to, and that undermines the whole system. And one way of eroding such a culture is to instate a welfare state, because that's the kind of society that builds that kind of ethic is a society where you have no welfare state, where you have to rely on people around you. But more on that you can find in Nima Sanandaji's book Debunking Utopia. If you're interested in how Nordic culture works in relation to welfare states and about the Nordic model, you really should check that book out. For the international audience, it's written in English. It's written for an American audience.
Yeah. That's why a lot of people in our country really hate that guy, Tino Sanandaji, because he really reaches sort of an international audience.
Yeah, and this is Tino's brother.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Tino Sanandaji.
No, his brother Nima.
Nima. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I haven't read him. I gotta check that out.
Yeah, they're immigrants. Splendid.
Yeah.
They're the good type.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's also something, but I mean, I don't even know if we have time to cover that, but the whole Uncle Tom attitude that it comes to when it's immigrants in Sweden. We have lots of Arab how should I say, that maybe it's a bit of a generalization, but you get the point. Like Middle Eastern immigrants who are actually against free immigration, who are conservatives, who are just reasonable people in general, and they get so much shit from everybody. They get like people in mainstream media, like people, they get away with calling this. We have a journalist who works at one of our biggest papers, Göteborgs-Posten. They called her like the Swedish equivalent of being a house nigger, because I think she's from Romania from the beginning. And she's critical of just mass immigration of people who lack any form of job, like human capital whatsoever. And she criticized that idea and said that maybe that isn't that profitable. And then these other people are also immigrants. They called her a house nigger, and they completely got away with it.
Yeah.
And that is very much. I really think we should make a point out of that, or I should make a point out of that, because a lot of I get comments from people like, you just hate every single person who is an immigrant, and that's bullshit. Like some of the greatest individuals currently that I'm following on different news media and everything, they're immigrants. The fact that's just fascinating with these groups of people is that the left has completely kidnapped immigrants. Like as soon as they come into the country, the like social democrats and people on the left and the Green Party, they start grooming immigrants.
But not to the same extent that the Democrats is using Latino Americans as a voter base, as an imported voter base. I don't think that is exactly how it works around here.
That's exactly. That's a lot worse in the Democrats' case. Also, when it comes to just African Americans in general.
Yeah, I think around here it's really more. How should I put it? It's an ideological thing here. I think they don't like white people. I think that's the root of it.
They don't like themselves, and they don't like other white people because they're always white. That's the thing. The people that do this, they're always painfully white.
Yeah, and I think they have conflated some things. I think they believe that that everything is a zero-sum game, and if they have it better than others, that means that they must give for others to get, and giving for them is a painful act. So, ergo, the more they hurt themselves, the better they are, the more virtuous they are, the more giving they are. So I think they simply believe that the more they hurt themselves, the better people they are. It's really, like what is that Christian sect called from the 15th century? The French people that went around flogging themselves.
Something? Flago.
Yeah.
Like flagellating. Flatulence, no. But self-flagellation or some shit. Yeah, I know what I mean. The knotted ropes and all that kinky shit. Yeah. No, I mean that's really what they're doing in an ideological sense. They're and I think it's great you brought up the zero sum. I mean basically the zero sum fallacy. That's something we have in Sweden, and I mean we have that all over the world. I mean it's just a disgusting idea that from what I've seen really got its foothold deep in academia just in general during the 1960s, where if anybody is doing well, it's because someone else is doing poorly. Yeah. And it's a complete intellectual fallacy. There's I mean, if you have a person who works hard and you have a lazy person, the person who works hard isn't doing well because the lazy person is obviously not doing well. It's because the person is lazy. That's why he's doing poorly.
Yeah, but Marxists just can't see that, because this whole thing is just so deeply rooted in Marxism, and that is why it has been such a. That's why people believe that on a broad scale today, because basically people are adapting a Marxist way of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's why, like, the left we have in Sweden, the social justice warrior type people in general, they don't, like, they hate people with like, you know, you and my, our views on certain topics, but there's nothing they hate more than a successful, non-victimizing immigrant. I've noticed this. They like in other parts of the world also they hate black people who are successful and who say that they're successful because they worked hard. Because it completely debunks their bullshit about a zero-sum fallacy. Because here you have a person who should be a failure because the white man is always doing better and everything, apparently. And then you have a successful black man, and then everything just crumbles. Which really shows how nasty this type of idea is. And I mean, we have it everywhere. When I went to university, we got force-fed this shit. It's an intellectual type of whipping. I mean, it's really hard to sort of zero in on everything that I wanted to bring up with your video, but yeah, I think I got a lot out of it, and I want to thank you for actually taking me up on this offer. You know, I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit here. We should do this again. I think this was fun.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I would love to do this again.
Yeah, great. I mean, we have the concept of, like, not the concept, but the topic of the insanity of Sweden is yeah, you have a lot of subject matter to talk about.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, thanks a lot, and I hope you're gonna enjoy the rest of your evening. And
I will do my best.
Yeah. Okay, we'll be in touch. And thanks all of you who have been listening. I hope this was interesting. Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.